tracing back the journey 25 years back when Infi entered the bourses. Keeping it with the walk down the memory lane for Infosys, let's touch base with a very special guest, Mr. Vallabh Bhansali, Chairman, ENAM Group. ENAM, of course, managed the IPO when it hit the pretty much hit the street 25 years back, and rest assured there was a lot of skepticism and drama that played out then. However, conviction was what drove investors to the business over the long term. So, Mr. Bhansali, it's great that you could join us on this very special day to really help us understand the Infosys journey over the last 25 years, because you were pretty much at the helm of things when the journey began. So let's start off. Let's start off by marking 25 years since the Infosys IPO. Returns have been manifold over the last 2 decades plus. Take us through how you met the Infi founders, since you invested in them even before managing their issue. And what convinced you then to put your money in a little known company? Let's start off with that.
Well, this started sometime in '91. I had a colleague, Mr. Puranik, who used to work for State Bank and who was covering this little company in Bangalore, and who was so impressed by the value system of the promoters. And then he introduced me to Mr. Murthy. So we kind of interviewed each other rigorously, and we just had tremendous confidence in each other. He trusting us with his IPO and we trusting him with a little of our money. It was quite extraordinary, even at that time when there were a few hundred employees, a few crores in turnover. But Mr. Murthy's confidence and clarity about whatever he did and said was hard not to be impressed by. I had already met hundreds of promoters by then, but Mr. Murthy stood completely apart. His rigor on values stood out. His eye for detail stood out. And he was a conservative man, so he didn't spell out what all could happen, nor did he really know what all could happen. But he explained how things worked, and that understanding of how things worked was extremely impressive.
Oh, indeed, impressive is the word. But Mr. Bhansali, when Infosys launched its IPO in 1993, very few people know this, it was barely subscribed when it closed. You then had to pick up the unsubscribed amount as the merchant banker managing the issue. While this paid rich dividends for you later on and for your family members and your friends, were there moments of a rethink then? How did the founders react when the IPO didn't do well?
Well, they're extremely gentlemanly people and understanding people. They had fullest trust in us. They had seen the kind of effort we had put in. In the early 90s, around that time, we didn't have a concept like analyst meet. So I remember having held the first or the second analyst meet of any kind in this country, and one of them was Infosys at that point of time. So they had seen that, we had left no stone unturned. But we had kept them in the loop that, look, the market had turned suddenly. It was the month of February, and I don't remember the event exactly what happened. But the markets used to be very finicky at those points of time. There used to be huge volatility. And February and March were months that were normally shunned, but then, the company needed the money, so we decided to go ahead with the market, go ahead with the IPO. So, well, when we had the turbulent weather, there was no doubt in my mind that, we are going to make arrangement for, getting the issue subscribed, howsoever within the time allotted to us. And that's what we did. Of course, Mr. Murthy and promoters were very, very anxious. But I remember telling Mr. Murthy on one of the conversations that, Mr. Murthy, please don't call me. I want you to go to sleep, because I can tell you I'm awake 24 hours until the job is done. And that's what our spirit was, and that's what we did. And we got a lot of our friends and family and all employees and all of them to subscribe to the issue. And I'm happy that, the confidence played out. But it was not because we had an idea that this will, grow thousands of times. But that's not how, we had built our reputation or we thought about it. We have done similar things for some of the other issues as well, which may not be as well known. But that was probably more our commitment to whatever we took up.
What a magical time it must have been as you recall all of it. But over the years, Mr. Bhansali, Infosys has also set new benchmarks in terms of financial disclosures. And they're one company, if you look back in the history of corporate India, which has always been clean and unprecedented at that point. Would you say the nudge came from the founder group and their way of thinking and functioning?
Oh, of course. See, Mr. Murthy's life story is probably not as well known, but how from a very young age, he was full of idealism. And he was like one of the most wanted, one of the most cherished IT professional in the country. But how he still chose to, work for an IIM or for a cause. And then when he, took on his young colleagues, how he wanted to make them partners, how he guided them, and so on. So, this idealism that he had, and all his colleagues, imbibed that idealism, and all of them put together had no difficulty. No one had a dispute if he said that, we must be transparent, we must be sacrificing, we must give, stock options to our employees, we must give guidance, we must put that pressure on ourselves, so that how does the poor shareholder know? So the kind of detailed thinking that he had about, how to constitute a board and various parameters. So it was extraordinary to see this, 7, and then when once Mr. Raghavan retired, the rest of the founders, how they fell in sync and acted on everything. So I think a lot of credit to the leader, but of course, due credit to all the other co-founders and some of their brilliant colleagues like Mr. Mohandas Pai, etc. So I think it was a dream run for the country, not only for Infosys and its shareholders, but for the country as a whole.
Okay, Mr. Bhansali, I'm going to ask you to please stay with us, and we're going to continue this discussion on Infosys and your fond memories when considering you were the man behind the IPO. But just stay with us for a short while. I'm going to take a quick commercial break and be right back. Marking this momentous occasion of Infy turning 25 years old as a listed entity on the exchanges, and who better than the man behind the IPO, Vallabh Bhansali, is still with us. Mr. Bhansali, just looking back at the story of Infosys, despite a flush of capital and funds, we haven't seen too many new companies replicating the Infosys wealth creation story. And correct me if I'm wrong, at least in that scale and scope. Why is it that you think Infosys has turned out to be this exception? Is there a dearth of leadership somewhere, would you say?
Well, I think Wipro, though the listing technically was way back in the 40s, Wipro also created a lot of wealth. TCS also created a lot of wealth. May not be on the same scale, but significant. The one interesting feature of a business of IT was that it is not a capital intensive business, and therefore you can do a lot more wealth creation. Say Kotak Mahindra Bank or HDFC Bank or even HDFC itself have created a lot of wealth for shareholders, but all of them are capital intense, so they have right issues or capital raises from time to time. Infosys raised all of less than some $75 or $80 million in its career for the billions of dollars of market cap. So I would say that, well, there are newer age companies which I really look up to, whether it be iShare, whether it be, InfoEdge. A lot of these companies have highest standards, great value system. And I would, still salute them, even if they have multiplied the wealth hundreds of times. So Kotak Mahindra Bank had done an outstanding job. But the nature of business is different, so I wouldn't want to compare them. So I think we must salute the ones who are, doing well. There will be others, who are falling behind, but that's a part of life.
That indeed is the case. But, Infosys, TCS have pretty much set a benchmark on the kind of value creation and wealth creation they have delivered for investors across asset classes or across all classes. Infosys itself has seen multiple challenges in the last few years. So yes, 20 years were great, Mr. Bhansali, but the last 5 years have been bumpy. With Mr. Nandan Nilekani at the helm now, do you see the company regaining its mojo? What do you make of this constant comparison that people have between Infosys and TCS? Because TCS got listed in 2004, 2005, came in much later, but has run ahead in the race, so to speak, to become the most dominant, influential IT company right now. So how do you look at that comparison, and what do you have to say about that?
I think both are great companies. Both learned from each other, and they'll continue to learn from each other. And well, nothing beyond that. I don't see them as, oh, this has gone a little ahead, or this has fallen behind. Both have done such enormous good to their customers, employees, and the country. So yes, Infosys had some leadership issues. But we must also take note that in such a transparent manner, all the leadership changes happened. They did something extremely ambitious of all promoters walking out and leaving it to professional. It was an experiment. And something that could have, it is setting a paradigm or trying to create a paradigm for the whole country that, how founders can fade away and leaving things to professionals. So it's an experimentation, it's an evolutionary process. That was attempted, and that is continuing at Infosys. It will bring its own rewards in due course, I'm sure. But Infosys is getting back its mojo. It's not right really to, compare any one particular period to another, because the circumstances are quite different. And as long as you are doing much better than the market in a given circumstance, I think, I'm full of admiration for that performance, and I'm sure that Infosys will achieve that kind of performance, above market performance, catering to several parameters on, efficiency of capital or marketplace or leadership in certain segments or in customers and so on and so forth.
Right. But Mr. Bhansali, I still have to ask you, because this is perhaps the key question on the market's mind. What is the road ahead looking like for Infosys? What do you think the company needs to do to regain investor confidence and stakeholder confidence? Because, there are two camps now, the believers and the non-believers. And yes, we've seen some respite in the stock on the back of the currency and the business environment changing. But what can the company do to get the investor confidence back on board?
Well, I think Infosys, as far as I can see, has a growing tribe of believers more than non-believers. The stock price has been moving up steadily. Company's performance is moving up steadily. Guidance is an internal philosophy, and well, as long as it is grounded in what the reality is, I have no complaints about it. Salil Parekh has come from a different atmosphere, different environment, different growth rate, different margins, capital efficiency. So it will take some time for him to absorb the contours and the mechanism of this business. But he is an extremely sober, very steady sort of person who understands the business at large. And I think I have good hope that in the next 6-9 months, he will show complete understanding of the business. He will have his own innovative style of bringing about better efficiency, better market share gains, and so on. So I don't think they have to do anything particularly different. Yes, stock market is an emotional place. It's also an opportunistic place. So different people have different time and pace at which they get on and get off. So that's all right. It's a part of the process. I think they're doing well.
It sure is. But Mr. Bhansali, can't let you go without asking you about your fondest memory of the Infosys IPO. Any anecdote perhaps that has stayed with you till date?
I think there are two incidents. One was when I went to meet Mr. Murthy for the first time. I was late by a few minutes, and he didn't fail to point that out. And the second story that I would like to share is that in their very first annual report after it went public, the director's report had a statement when they talked about how they are going to, deal with shareholders. And the statement was, transparency is going to be our competitive advantage. Way back in '94, not many people understood what it meant. It was extraordinary that they were so clear that they would be transparent. And if people can see that in the right perspective, they would understand that why Mr. Murthy was so upset about whatever was happening in the board. Transparency meant so much to him, not only as a value, but he also saw that as a competitive advantage. So I think these are the two things that stand out in my mind, that he was fearless and he didn't fail to point out if someone was not, even if it is a few minutes delay in the very first meeting, he would point it out.
Mr. Bhansali, such a pleasure having you today on the board, sir. And, really it matters a lot to get an opinion and views on Infosys, what the magic it was, what the magic it can create from here onwards. Coming from you, the man really behind the IPO, it makes a lot, it means a lot for us. Thank you so much.